Well, hello everyone. Good morning. Happy New Year. If I have not seen or spoken to you at all, welcome to our 2025 Disruptive Leadership Series. Over the next hour, we want to make this webinar as interactive as possible, but we do have a lot of ground to cover. So we will be using the chat feature throughout. I will try to casually pause our speaker throughout to respond to any questions that come into the chat for her to address. You can also send your questions to me directly if you don't feel comfortable putting them in the group chat. Today's webinar will be facilitated by Christina Martin, and Christina is a certified life coach, trainer, and motivational speaker who loves solving people-oriented problems. So please help me welcome Christina in the chat, and now the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christina Martin. I am a certified coach and training facilitator and the very proud owner of Christina Coaches. Today, I am here as a leadership consultant with the Leadership Institute, and I know that we're going to have a really good time. I feel like I am one of the luckiest ladies alive because for a living, I get to be a professional game changer, not only for the organizations that I work with, but for professionals and leaders just like you. So as I'm working with leaders and they're looking to level up their communication, one of the first resources that we'll go to for books is Radical Candor. And so we're going to dive into the content. I'm going to share my screen. I'll give you just a second. All right, Brianna, you can see my screen? All right, full screen? Very good. All right, welcome everybody to Radical Candor. Hold on one more second. I want to be able to make sure I can see the chat and there's still people coming in. All right, let's dive into it. So during our time together today, there are a few things that we're going to make sure that we do. We're going to explore Radical Candor. I'm going to tell you not only what it is, we're also going to talk about what it is not because it's so important. We're going to do a brief self-reflection exercise, and then we're going to dive into the key concepts around Radical Candor. This is normally a much longer class, so I promise you I'm going to try to cover the most important fundamentals of it that you can do in 60 minutes. I'm going to be sharing best practices throughout, and at the end of class, I'm going to give you a homework takeaway so that you can take action on what you've learned. Here's my first question for all of you. I want you all to just think about this and answer me in the chat. What's the cost of avoiding difficult conversations in your team or your organization? What's the cost? What's the consequence for your team or your organization when you avoid difficult conversations? Ooh, Amber says, stopping someone's growth. Heather, hey Heather. Heather says company morale decreases. Wanda, losing good team member. Oh, they're out the door, girl. Anna says the organization flatlines, there's no growth. Very good. Those are really great answers, and you're absolutely true. Cynthia says moving forward with the wrong strategy for your organization, and Alicia says resentment. Alicia, I'm going to give you the bell. I like that one. Kimberly says continued bad behavior and poor performance. Catherine says, I found that you resist, that what you resist tends to persist. So it really can impact all relationships. Those are great answers, and you're absolutely right. That's a lot of what I see with the organizations I work with, and probably what you all see in your own organizations. You're going to see a decrease in morale and productivity. We're going to see more people walking out the door. It's going to eat away at trust and credibility. Your performance, stagnant, because we're not growing. We're going to see an increase in conflict and drama, and you're going to see inconsistent standards across the board, just to name a few. I want you to think for just a second, think to yourself, what if you could improve your relationships with your team just by balancing the honesty that you need in these hard conversations with genuine care for your team members? What would that do for your team? So my goal for today is to help you begin to develop the skills to navigate these challenging conversations with the confidence and compassion that you need to do so. So let's start by defining radical candor. Radical candor is a concept that was introduced by Kim Scott in her book by the same name, and it's defined as the approach of providing honest feedback to others while simultaneously caring personally about them. So for some of you on this call, you hear that definition and you might think, well, that sounds easy, right? And then there's the rest of us who heard that definition and think, well, girl, that couldn't be harder. That sounds impossible. The good news is that while for some of us this might seem challenging at first, radical candor is absolutely a skill that can be learned and can be practiced. But I just want to put radical candor in more simple terms, and this is actually a quote. Radical candor really just means saying what you think while also giving a darn about the person you are saying it to, okay? So everybody, I just want you to just follow me here. I want you to think about this. Have you ever worked for a leader who spoke without thinking, or who used shame and embarrassment as a tool for change? Maybe you work for somebody who would rather gaslight you or manipulate you rather than communicate with you directly. Maybe you or your coworkers were punished for something another coworker did because your leader refused to address the problem head on with that particular person, and they chose to just do a blanket punishment for everybody. These are all examples of leadership where radical candor is not present. And the unfortunate thing about these examples is that over time, sometimes they can actually rub off on us as leaders. So I love to use this book to challenge the leaders that I work with to unlearn their bad communication and feedback habits that have been presented to them over time. Because all too often as leaders, we end up giving what we've been given. So my challenge for each of you is, if you don't listen to anything else I say for the next 60 minutes, don't give your team what you got from your previous leaders. Give them what you deserved, okay? All right. So in my work with leaders, I've often encountered some pretty interesting misconceptions about radical candor, and these misunderstandings can just really get in the way and prevent them from fully embracing the concept. So I want to take a look at some of the ones that I hear all too often. One of my favorites, well, it's just about being blunt. No. People often think radical candor means I'm just going to be brutally honest, or I'm just going to be out to hurt people's feelings with honesty as a weapon. I want you to remember it's about balancing honesty with care. The goal is not to be harsh, but it is to be clear while showing genuine concern for the person. The next one, it only involves giving negative feedback. No. Radical candor includes both positive and negative feedback. It's just about recognizing the strengths and successes just as much as addressing the areas for improvement. Well, it's too confrontational. Okay, no. Some believe that radical candor is just going to lead to constant conflict, but when it's done correctly, it actually reduces tension by addressing issues early and constructively. My next favorite, well, it's just about sugarcoating feedback. No, it's not. It's not about being overly nice or just constantly softening feedback to avoid hurting somebody's feelings. It's about delivering honest, constructive feedback in a way that helps others grow without diminishing the truth or you as the leader losing your authenticity. Okay, well, it's just a conversation I got to have one time and then I'm done with this. No. Radical candor is supposed to be ongoing. It's about creating a culture where open, honest communication is going to be a regular part of how you and your team operate. Now, radical candor sounds great for your team members, but here's the deal. Why is it so hard for us as leaders to get behind it? For some of us, we struggle because we have the fear of hurting somebody else's feelings. Then there's the potential for conflict, which, hey, nobody wants to deal with that. Then there's the risk of rejection. What if I'm honest and then the other person now rejects my ideas or my feedback or even me personally? Then there's a lack of confidence behind having these types of conversations, maybe because I don't have the skill or there's been no training or resources provided to me to teach me how to do it. Some leaders have the fear of damaging relationships, right? I don't want to mess things up with my team going forward. And then in some instances, there's the issue of power dynamics. Sometimes these conversations are not always just with team members who fall below us in the hierarchy. Sometimes these conversations involve speaking to someone directly who's in a position of authority, or maybe even with more experience than you, which can be a little intimidating due to the perceived power imbalance for you. Here's what I want you to know. If you're asking, why would I want to do this with my team? There are so many benefits to using Radical Candor, okay? It's going to help you to build trust. It's going to improve communication. It can help to boost your overall team performance. It's going to encourage growth for all of you using that honest feedback, and it's going to create a more positive work environment, all right? So we're going to do a quick self-reflection exercise. Self-reflection is one of my favorite tools one of my favorite tools when I'm training and coaching. So here's what I want you to know. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll give you a short amount of time. If you have pen and paper, great. If you don't worry about it. Just to answer these questions to yourself. You will not be sharing your answers in the chat. So I want you to feel free to be open and honest with your answers. Brianna and I might share our answers back and forth out loud, but you will not have to. All right. So here we go. Here's my first question for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with giving direct, honest feedback to others? 1 being, please, no, make it stop. 10 being, bring it on. I got this. All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with giving direct, honest feedback to other people? 1 being, oh, no, I'm the worst. 10 being, I'm the best. Brianna, I'm going to call you on the spot. What's your answer?
5. I will land in the middle on that one.
Okay, not bad. Nothing wrong with that number. For me, it depends on the situation. If it's a professional setting, I'm at 8.5. Always room for growth. Super good. If it's on a personal level, I won't even give you a number. We'll skip. All right. Next question. Have I ever avoided giving feedback because I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings? Yes or no? Pretty easy question. Second part to that question, what were the consequences? Feel free to just list out one consequence if you're writing it down, or if in your mind, just one. Have you ever avoided giving feedback because you didn't want to hurt someone's feelings? And if so, give me one consequence. I'll tell you one very easily. Continued behavior, unfortunately, for me. Have you ever avoided giving feedback because you didn't want to hurt someone's feelings? And if so, what were the consequences? All right, next question. How do you typically respond when someone gives you candid feedback? Do you appreciate it, or do you become defensive? How do you typically respond when someone gives you candid feedback? Brianna, how do you respond?
I was going to say, I am going to take a note out of your book. Personally, I wouldn't even go there. So we're not going to talk about that. Professionally, I appreciate it. I really want you to give me the real, the gritty, how did I do? How am I doing? Because if you falsify it, you're creating, false confidence. So that's my response to that.
I love that. For me, I pretty much always appreciate it. I like to take a step back so I can really think about what has been presented to me, but rarely do I become defensive. I will hear you out. All right, next up. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do I listen to my team members when they provide feedback to me? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, what did you say? I didn't hear you because I wasn't listening to you. 10 being, I'm the best listener ever. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you listen to your team members? Brianna, what's your number? As for me, I'm a 9. I'm really good at listening. All right, uh-oh. Brianna, did I lose my connection?
Yes, you did, Christina. And you're muted. as well.
Hold on. There we go.
There we go.
I love it. I'm not going to let technology get me down today. I'm not going to do it. This is why you always all in, just in case. All right. So I need to reshare my screen.
Correct.
All right. You can see that?
I can see it. You're on your current slide.
Aha! All right. Very good. All right. We'll move on to the next one. Last question. I'm going to give y'all a couple of moments to think about this. What could I gain from learning to communicate more directly while also demonstrating genuine care for others? What could I gain? What could you gain?
I think true insight and a different perspective, those would be some things that you could gain.
I like that. True growth. Growth, absolutely. Some more opportunities for growth, connection, building stronger relationships with my team. Radical Candor is a great platform for that. All right, now that we've taken a moment to reflect and explore just a little bit our relationship with Radical Candor, let's dive into the key concepts around it. All right, here we go. Radical Candor is based on two key factors that you're going to see on the X and the Y axis. How much we care personally and how directly we challenge other people. So from there, Radical Candor is broken down into 4 quadrants to help you understand the different ways of communicating based on those two things. We will get into the 4 quadrants here in a little bit later, but for right now, we want to focus on those 2 key factors. We're going to start off with caring personally. This is all about how we demonstrate our genuine concern for the individual person beyond their work performance, right? So taking the time to understand their goals and their challenges and their aspirations. That involves recognizing your team member or your employee as a whole human being beyond just their professional role, okay? So someone on this call is thinking, all right, well, Christina, that sounds good, but how do I begin to care for someone personally on my team? That's a great question, Heather. Thank you so much for asking. I'm going to tell you right now. First tip, let's get to know our employees, all right? Let's take an interest in their personal interests and goals. So just take time to learn about their life outside of work. What are they interested in? What are their aspirations? Next up, I cannot tell you how many times I go into organizations and talk to leaders who do not do regular check-ins with their team members. Whether they do team meetings or one-on-ones, they have no consistent cadence, and I am always shocked by this. So please make sure you're conducting regular one-on-one meetings, not just to discuss their projects and deadlines and their career goals, but we should also be inquiring about their personal well-being, not just work-related issues. Next up, we want to show empathy and support. Make sure that you're active listening when your employees are communicating with you, right? We want to validate their feelings and their perspectives when we're having conversations, but we also want to offer help and assistance. So be proactive in offering your team members support, whether it's a work-related challenge or sometimes even personal matters, and if you're able to do so. We got to build trust through transparency. So we want to have, when and where we can, honest communication. Be open and honest. Share your experiences and your vulnerabilities with your team members. And then we have to be consistent and we have to follow up and follow through. So we have to show our team members we're reliable by consistently following through on the commitments and the promises that we make to them. But there are a couple of mistakes I want to make sure that you avoid in caring personally for your team members. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So when we're caring personally, we're not going to be treating every single team member the same way without recognizing their individual needs or preferences or aspirations. We're also not going to ignore the need for personal development and just focus solely on professional goals and tasks. Don't neglect opportunities to support your team members through personal growth and development. I have a lot of leaders right now who are bringing me in to do personal growth and development topics as well as just outside of professional training and development. Also, don't neglect recognition. This is such a small thing, but I shouldn't say small, such an easy thing to do, but such a very easy thing to forget as well. Don't forget to acknowledge or celebrate your team members' successes, their milestones, or their contributions to the team's goals. This is huge and something that is just all too often overlooked by leaders. The second key concept is challenging directly. This is what most leaders seem to have a bigger issue with doing. This is where we're offering straightforward and clear feedback that addresses areas for improvement or development, and it's going to be delivered in a way that is respectful and constructive. So when we are challenging directly, I want you to be clear and specific, right? Focus on the behaviors or the actions rather than generalizations or people's personal traits. Be respectful when we do so. Be constructive. So we want to offer suggestions and solutions for improvement. This is how we lead to growth and development. We also got to do it timely. Sometimes we get in our heads about having difficult or hard conversations and we wait 6 weeks, 6 days, 7 months, which leads to bigger problems. We got to deliver these conversations promptly and allow for the person to understand and act upon the feedback that you have given them in a timely manner. There are some mistakes I want you to avoid when we are challenging people directly. Don't avoid having difficult conversations. Don't choose to ignore stuff. Don't choose to sidestep issues that require honest feedback. Okay, we're going to do it and we're going to face things head on. Avoid being vague and ambiguous when we're giving feedback. We need to be specific, okay? When we do that and we're vague, you make it difficult for the person on the receiving end to understand, what do I need to change or where do I need to improve? Don't do that. Stay away from attacking or blaming, criticizing. When we get into blaming people personally rather than addressing specific behaviors or actions that need improvement, we create issues for defensiveness. We hinder a productive conversation and dialogue with them. Also, don't withhold feedback. Holding back or, again, delaying feedback that could help the person grow or improve, we're missing a key opportunity here. So we want to stay away from that. And avoid being insensitive or harsh. Remember, radical candor is not about being disrespectful. It's not about being mean. We don't want to undermine trust and damage the relationship or strength of your bond within your team, all right? So here are some tips for challenging directly. I want you to make sure that you balance criticism with praise. So offer constructive criticism while you also recognize and praise achievements or positive contributions. This helps maintain a balanced perspective and reinforce desired behaviors that you want to see coming from your team members. We also want this to be a two-way dialogue. So we want to foster an environment where our team members feel comfortable sharing their perspectives and concerns with this, coming to us knowing that we're approachable, and we have an open door policy for them. Make sure when we're talking to our team members in this two-way dialogue that you are active listening and that you're engaging in constructive dialogue with them so that they can understand the viewpoints that you're putting before them. Most importantly, I need you to follow up and support the team member. Provide that ongoing support after you deliver challenging feedback. Follow up with them. Offer resources, offer guidance, offer mentoring to help the team member address the areas for improvement and to achieve the goals that you put before them. All right? And we're going to take a deep dive into the 4 quadrants. Again, these 4 quadrants represent different ways of communicating based on how much you care personally and how much you challenge directly. All right, so let's take a look at them. In the top right-hand corner, we've got radical candor. That's where we want to be. This means we have a high level of care and a high level of challenge. This is where we're going to see growth and profound change. So you're showing that you care while we are being honest and direct. Next to that, on the left, you're going to see ruinous empathy. Here, we have a very high level of care with a very low level of challenge. This is where we see ignorance and no change. So here, I care a lot, but I'm just going to avoid telling you what I need to tell you and giving you honest feedback. I'm out. Down below that to the right, obnoxious aggression. Here, I have a very low level of care, but a very high level of challenge. This is where things are going to get a little tense. We're going to be defensive, and we're going to see very little change in this situation. So I'm being direct without showing you that I care. So I'm just going to come across as harsh, maybe mean, disrespectful, or even hurtful. And then lastly, we have manipulative insincerity, low level of care, low level of challenge. This is where we're going to see our team members maybe feeling mistrust, and we're not going to see any change in behavior here because, hey, I neither care nor am I honest with you. And this is going to lead ultimately to unproductive communication between us and our team members. So radical candor, again, this is the ideal approach when we are providing feedback. This is where we want to be in communication with our team members. But unfortunately, it can prove to be very difficult, if not impossible, for some of us who always sit in radical candor in all of our interactions. So we're going to take a look at the other quadrants, and I'm going to teach you for each of the other quadrants. If you find yourself there, how can I shift myself back to radical candor? All right, but first, I want to look at some examples of radical candor. First up, we're going to start with constructive feedback and support. So imagine telling a team member, I noticed your presentation had some errors. Let's review them together so you can improve for the next time. I want you to know I'm here to help. Okay? Truth still sits in that statement. There are errors here. We're also looking towards the future, and if you notice, I'm also providing support. Let's review them together so that you can improve for the next time. Okay, instead of us just sitting down and going over all of the errors they had in the presentation and just kind of hammering what's wrong in the past, I'm going to address this with honesty. I'm going to provide support towards an improved future outcome. All right, next up, we're going to give honest encouragement. And I'm going to say, your recent work, it was really impressive, but there's a potential issue with the approach you decided to take. Let's discuss how we can address it to make it even better. I hope you guys are seeing how this is still like feedback. Actually, this is what we would call feed forward, which I love teaching feed forward. And every time I bring it up, leaders absolutely love it. But it feels different. It feels less personal, less like an attack, and more like someone who's offering you advice to improve in the future, right? There's less of a spotlight on the error. We are addressing it, but there's more of a spotlight on how we can fix it for, again, better future outcomes. Also, let's give some direct communication with empathy, okay? I've observed that you've been struggling with your deadlines lately. I want to understand what's causing this so that we can work together to find a solution. See how that sounds? Sounds better than, okay, what's going on with you? Everything that you turned in this week has been late. What's the problem? Same message, it feels different, not only for the person on the receiving end, but for us as the person delivering the message. So let's get into ruinous empathy. Again, high level of care, very low level of challenge. I've worked with a lot of leaders who struggle with ruinous empathy. They hate confrontation and they just allow issues to go unaddressed because we want to just avoid discomfort. I just don't want to go there. Here's what I want you to know. That comfort comes at a cost, which is going to be decreased morale and performance, missed opportunities for growth. The list goes on and on. So let me give you some examples of what it looks like when we have ruinous empathy. Number one, we're running from hard conversations. We're telling our team members, I don't want to upset you, so I'm just going to let this slide. Even though you know the performance is not where it needs to be, and it's only going to get worse from here. All right, or better yet, we got our head in the sand. We are overlooking issues. We're going to be ignoring the mistakes and just avoiding any type of discomfort around having a conversation we don't want to have. Or we are just going to give non-constructive praise, right? Very vague praise, like, you're doing a great job, without addressing specific areas for improvement or growth, which may lead to complacency. One of the things I will share with you when I work with leaders who are just conflict adverse or difficult conversation adverse, the first thing that we do is work together to change their mindset around conflict. I'm going to give you some tips in here that I share with them as well that help people a lot of the times to feel more comfortable around having difficult conversations.
Christina, you just, your presentation just closed out.
Interesting. Okay.
And
I'm
I
still here
am
though.
going to blame me. My internet connection is unstable, so I'm not sure if I am the one that's causing the issues here.
No problem. We're making it work.
Your full presentation is back up, Christina.
Woo! All right, we got it. So I always talk to them and to help them change their mindset around difficult conversations. But there's a quote from Peter Bromberg that I love, 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 which is when we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. Okay, so please stop running from the conversations and let's get prepared and armed with the right tools to help us be more comfortable. So how we move ourselves from ruinous empathy to radical candor, okay? When you find yourself there, how do we move over? Number one, I love this tip, just start with small, honest feedback. Start by giving honest feedback on very minor issues, gradually building your confidence in being direct while I still show the other person that I care about them. This can help you to get more comfortable with balancing that empathy with that honesty, all right? Focus on the long-term benefits. Remember that when you are honest and with your feedback, even when it's uncomfortable, ultimately the benefits for the other person are going to be to grow and improve. And we want to keep this in mind because it can make it easier to provide constructive feedback. I know that I'm gone, but I'll just keep telling you what's on.
It happened again, Christina. You're back, but you're muted.
Thank you. All right.
My deepest apologies, you all. I'm on the back end trying to switch hosting abilities so that I can stop the interruption. So my apologies.
You're fine. This is just building my character and it's showing everyone else how amazing I am. So I appreciate that. Thank you, universe. They needed the proof. All right. And so we want to focus on the long-term benefits, right? We want to keep that in mind because it'll make it easier for you to provide constructive feedback. And also when we're having these conversations, please practice active listening. When we're giving that feedback, listen to the other person's perspective. We want to make eye contact. We don't want to interrupt them when we're talking. We want to listen without judgment or jumping to conclusions, okay? Next up, manipulative insincerity. We got low care here and a low challenge. So when we communicate utilizing this, we can end up creating, unfortunately, a very toxic environment where our team members feel uncertain about where they stand. And if you've ever felt that way about a leader, you know it sucks, okay? So let's look at some examples of manipulative insincerity. First up, we might be expressing some feigned agreement. Maybe I'm nodding during a meeting like I'm agreeing with you, while privately I am disagreeing, right? And then talking about you behind your back instead of addressing the issue directly. I am gone again. Hold on. And I know I'm muted. Oh, God. Ooh, boy. Come on, baby. Bring me back. Hello? Oh, I think it mutes me when I leave.
No, I can hear you, Christina.
Oh, good. Y'all heard all of that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, thank God I didn't say cuss words. All right. Thank you, Jesus. Woo! The Lord is good. All right.
You are back. I can see you clearly.
Let me share my screen.
You're doing great.
All right. And we're going to go through now the examples of manipulative insincerity. First up, I already shared feigned agreement, but I'll go over it again. I'm in a meeting and I'm nodding as though I agree with you while I'm secretly disagreeing, and then maybe even talking about you behind your back, right? Because I don't want to address these things directly. Next up, we might be giving surface level compliments, right? I'm offering insincere praise, like, great job, girl, when I don't really believe the work is up to standard, but I want to avoid having a confrontation with you, or I just want to maintain the facade that I've built. Or I'm going to avoid accountability. So I'm pretending to support the idea in public, but I'm undermining it in private to ensure that it fails, rather than being honest in my reservations about what's going on. All right. Now remember, Adricia said she could still hear me. Can you still hear me?
Correct.
Because if so, I can keep going through my tips. Hey. All right, the screen will be up in just a second because it keeps popping up. But I'm going to share with you some best practices to help you. So when I find myself sitting in manipulative insincerity, how can I work my way back to radical candor? First and foremost, I want you to be honest with yourself first. So I'm going to challenge you to reflect on why you might be avoiding honesty, whether it's fear, whether it's conflict, or the discomfort around being direct. I need you to acknowledge this because it's going to help you commit to being more genuine and sincere in your communications moving forward. Also, prioritize the relationship. Shift your focus from self-preservation or avoiding confrontation to instead building trust and strengthening your relationships. I'm sharing again. Look at this. We got this. All right. Also, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the relationship, but next
You're muted, Christina.
I keep forgetting it mutes me when I come back. All right, so the next tip is practice direct communication in low stake situations. I love this tip. Start by being more direct and sincere in everyday low stake conversations. This is going to help you kind of build up the habit of combining honesty with care, right? So we're going to make it easier to practice radical candor then in more critical interactions because I practiced it in more safer situations first. All right. And then we're going to move on to obnoxious aggression. When we're sitting in obnoxious aggression with low care but high challenge, this can leave our team members feeling demotivated. They're going to feel alienated, and it's really going to work to undermine collaboration in our team. It's going to hinder our team's overall ability to perform and perform well. So when I'm sitting in an obnoxious aggression, some examples are maybe I'm telling somebody, your report is a mess and you clearly didn't put any effort into this. Stop, full stop. I'm not offering any constructive feedback. I'm not offering suggestions or support to help the person improve it. How's that feel? It does not feel great. Or I'm giving blunt feedback. I don't care about your personal issues. You need to get your work done on time or face the consequences, okay? This disregards their situation and focuses solely on the task. And is there a way to communicate that with care? Absolutely. All right. And then public shaming. I loathe this. Calling out a team member in a meeting with comments like, why can't you just get it right? This is not rocket science, okay? Which embarrasses them in front of their peers. So some best practices to help us when it comes to moving ourselves from obnoxious aggression to radical candor. Lead with empathy. Before giving feedback, take a moment to consider the other person's feelings and perspective. So one of the best tips that I can give you for leading with empathy in these types of conversations, I know I'm gone, but I'll keep talking. When my screen comes up, I'll make sure to unmute. But the best piece of advice that I can give you for this is, I unmuted first. And we're going to share again. Here we go. Is to walk into these conversations with a very high level of curiosity. Even if you feel like as the leader, you know what is going on in this situation, walking in with a very high level of curiosity is going to help you to open up to the other person's perspective and feedback. All right. Make sure that you frame your feedback constructively. Instead of just focusing solely on what's wrong, remember, we got to offer solutions and suggestions for improvement. We want to turn that criticism into a more collaborative effort for the person to grow. This is also how we get their buy-in, by making this a collaborative effort. And then don't be afraid to seek feedback on your approach. Ask for feedback on how you deliver your own feedback. This will help you understand how your communication style is being perceived, how you're being received, and it's going to allow you to adjust your approach to be more supportive and less harsh while you are still being honest, because at the end of the day, we do not want to lose the honesty. All right, so now I want to share some best practices that I think will continue to help you as we work on using radical candor in our communication with our team. Number one, leaders who care, prepare. The best piece of advice that I have around difficult conversations, around using radical candor, and really one of the reasons why I don't have an issue having difficult conversations with people, especially in a professional setting, is because of the amount of time I put into preparing for the conversations before I have them. If you don't have time to prepare for a difficult conversation, you shouldn't be having it, because I'm not sure when it cut out. So please make sure that you're spending time preparing for that difficult conversation before you have it. When we're preparing, sit down, define the purpose of the conversation. What am I trying to get out of this? What do I need to have happen as an outcome from this conversation? We got to have relevant information. What are the facts? What are the examples that I want to provide to the person so that they have a clear picture for what's going on? And then don't be afraid, draft the key message, write down the main points, bullet point it out so that you can make sure that you stay on track, that the conversation is productive, and that you communicate clearly. It's okay to prepare. Matter of fact, it's not okay. That's what you should be doing. Prepare your mindset before you have the conversation, because we want to be able to approach the conversation with an open mind and a willingness to listen, right? Because we want this to be collaborative rather than confrontational. When we're having these difficult conversations and using radical candor, remember to stay solution focused. We want to focus on finding solutions and making constructive plans rather than I'm just going to highlight the problems and that's it. Make sure to clarify the objectives. Again, I want to make sure that I know the other person is clear on the purpose for this conversation and what I am hoping to achieve. As adults, we don't practice enough. Practice makes perfect. Rehearse the conversation if necessary with a trusted colleague or mentor. This will help you to build confidence and also refine your approach. Allow the person to push back, to pretend to get emotional or upset, and this will help you to guide yourself through where do I need to potentially make some adjustments. Another tip I'm going to give you for practicing for this conversation, if my issue is with Brianna, and Cedricia is also a team member of mine, I will not be practicing that difficult conversation with Cedricia. We will not be practicing with other employees. We should be practicing with people at our level or above in our hierarchy, okay? So I'm not gonna go to Cedricia and be like, girl, I gotta have this difficult conversation with Brianna, so let me practice on you. No, ma'am, all right? We also wanna focus on future improvement. This is another very important key aspect from the book, and it's called Feedback Mastery. The art of giving and receiving feedback effectively. This is what's going to lead us to that personal and professional growth, not only for you, but for the person on the receiving end. Focus on future improvement. This is truly the difference between feedback and feed forward. So frame your feedback in terms of what the person can do differently in the future, rather than just dwelling on the mistakes that they made in the past and kind of hammering it into their head. Make sure when you're having these conversations, you are specific and actionable. Be clear and concrete in your suggestions so that the person can implement to improve this into their performance or in their behavior. It's gotta be clear. Also, make sure you link this to whatever the goal is or their goals are. Connect your suggestions to their individual goals or objectives, because this is what's going to make the feedback relevant. This is what's going to make their actions purposeful. Link it to goals. Make sure that you are encouraging dialogue with this person. Invite the person to discuss suggestions, share their thoughts, and because we want to foster a collaborative approach to their development, okay? This is how we get their buy-in. This is how we get them on board. We need to have open, honest communication flowing both ways between ourselves and the person on the receiving end, all right? I'm going to share a quote, and then I'm going to open it up for questions, and then also give you your homework as you walk away from this. If you're a leader, you should be spending over half of your time listening, but not listening in a vacuum. Listening with the intent to encourage and make the person you're talking with feel like the most important person in the room. All right. Now, I'm going to bring up your homework so that you'll see this. This is what I want you all to take away from this. What will you start, stop, or continue to do when you're practicing radical candor? What will you start, stop, or continue to do when you are practicing radical candor with your team members? All right, this is going to be your homework takeaway for today, but I do want to open up the floor for people to ask questions. If anybody has questions or even feedback, maybe you can share some best practices that you have with using radical candor with your teams, or some experiences and some of the lessons that you've learned. But don't forget, what will you start, stop, or continue to do when practicing radical candor with your team members? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see, and I'll check the chat to see.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. I'm checking the chat now. Any questions for Christina?
Oh, I do want to comment on something that I see in the chat from Catherine, which I absolutely love. And this is what I tell all my leaders to do. She says, I like to ask how they like to be celebrated, recognized, because everyone has their own preferences that should be honored. Catherine, baby girl, that bell's for you. I absolutely love that idea. This is so wonderful. We should all be doing this with our team members. And this is how we make sure that we don't take a one-size-fits-all approach to our leadership. How do you like to be recognized, if at all, because not everybody does. And like you said, honor their preferences and needs.
Yeah. You know what, Christina, it makes me think, I always give this example when I'm facilitating about love languages. I said, you know, if Christina's love language is acts of service and my love language is words of affirmation, but I'm giving Christina words of affirmation, you know, does she feel loved? And a lot of people are like, no. And that's exactly right? Whatever my love language is, I should not be overdosing and giving that to you if yours is the opposite. And so I think that's a perfect example of realizing that everybody's recognition, needs, and desires are different. We have some questions in the chat. Wanda says, what were the book titles that you have recommended during the presentation?
It is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Love it, awesome. Love it.
Thank you. We have another question. Any additional tips for when you are communicating to a team versus an individual?
Absolutely. Hold on. I'm going to be muted. Yes, absolutely. I think one of the most important tips when you are communicating with a team versus an individual, it's exactly like, what am I trying to communicate? I had a leader once, loved him to death, but he could, if someone on the team did something wrong, we all had to hear about it. And we were all corrected for the behavior of one person. So if Brianna came into work late, we were all brought into a team meeting and told the importance of showing up to work on time. And I'm going to tell you what ended up happening was it undermined his leadership, because I'm going to tell you what we did. We simply stopped listening because we thought, well, he ain't talking to me. He's talking to Brianna. So whatever he said, we just did whatever we wanted to do because we knew, well, even if I mess up, he's never going to address me individually. Here's what I want you to know. If it's a problem with one person, it's got to be discussed with one person. If it's an issue that you have some type of concern around this issue growing with the team as a whole, and you want to stop it before that action begins, that is when we can bring something up in a more generalized way without calling out Brianna individually for something. But if there's one person who's the source of the problem, the one person needs to be who we address and not everyone as a whole. It creates tension, it undermines your leadership and credibility. And so I just caution you to stay away from doing that. But it's definitely a blanket a lot of leaders like to hide behind when it's time to have difficult conversations and to confront issues. I hope that helps. Please tell me if you have additional questions around that.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. We have another question from Kirsty. She says, how does being remote change the approach for radical candor?
Ooh, that's a really good question. In my last role, I was remote for 2, almost 3 years. I loved it. A lot of people said that they felt like, communication and relationship stuff was different because they weren't in person. I never necessarily felt that way, but I also realized I operate with a very high level of empathy all the time when communicating with people and in relationships. And I have a really good knack for making people feel special and like they're important when I'm with them. And so I would say to you, number one, when we're remote, we want to make sure that we're still doing exactly the same things the tips say, but we still want to make sure we're building a connection with our team members, and maybe spending a little bit more time in that one-on-one situation, making sure that, yes, when we have our virtual one-on-one together as leader to team member, I am checking in on your well-being. Maybe we spend a little bit more time on that than we do in person, because in person, I see you at the water cooler. We walk up and talk about the kids, and remotely, that type of time and interactions and crossover really just doesn't happen. So I would tell you, please focus on that check-in, building connection, getting to know people, both what's important to them professionally, career goal-wise, aspirations, and also what's important to them outside of work-related issues. Put in a little bit more effort, I would say.
Great. Thank you, Christina. That was awesome. Another question. How do you feel like there are different approaches of radical candor related to dealing with different generations?
Ooh, that's such a great question.
Yeah.
This is a great question, but here's what I'm going to tell you, and I don't want people to get too wrapped up in it's a different generation, they're a different age. That is true, and that does matter, but it's still the same concept. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach for anybody. Even if everyone was the same age and your entire team was from the exact same generation, we're still going to have to make sure that we are customizing and taking unique approaches for each individual person, regardless of that. So I want you to people will get really wrapped up in, oh my God, they're this, and you're going to have to do it for everybody regardless, right? And yes, different generations communicate differently. They like communication in a different way. Maybe for some of them, they might want to lead in. Send me an email, tell me what we're going to discuss, give me an agenda before we have this difficult conversation. For some of them, they're going to need time to process what you're saying afterwards. So we won't have this one meeting in an hour and everything will be solved. We need to allow for them some time to step away, process what they've heard, and come back and finish the conversation. Be open, number one, to recognizing the differences in our multi-generational workforces, recognizing the needs of people and their preferences and being respectful of that to the best of your ability. But also we don't want to pigeonhole anyone into what we believe or think they need based on that. We're going to ask and we're going to honor.
Good. Thank you, Christina. Any tips for using candor when preparation just isn't possible?
That's an interesting question. I'd love to know why the person thinks preparation is not possible. Even if you had to set aside 10 to 15, it's a conversation that has to happen right away. Because let's just say Brianna just slapped Adricia, so we got to pull her to the side. It's a much more harsh conversation. It's not necessarily radical candor. We're now talking about performance management. But still, you've got 5 or 10 minutes to sit down to prep. Start bullet pointing out what happened, what you know, what questions you need to ask, and also preparing your mindset in that 5, 10, 15 minutes that you have before the conversation to make sure I'm walking in with a healthy sense of curiosity to understand their perspective. What are the facts? How do I show that I care, right? By showing that I care, what's support or assistance that I'm going to offer? What are my suggestions for solution? How do I keep this solution based throughout the conversation? How do I stay away from attacking and blaming during this conversation? How do I not jump to conclusions or interrupt Brianna as she's telling me, why she slaps Adricia? But again, there's time to prepare. And if you don't have time, wait to have the conversation. Because this is how we get into avoiding. This is how we start to withhold our feedback and honesty when we don't have the time to prepare and feel confident in the position that we're bringing to the table.
Awesome. That was going to be my next comment. And that goes back to what you presented Tuesday for us internally at CSU, Christina, when you said, hey, if you don't have time to prepare, then wait to have the conversation. So, and you said exactly that at the end. We have another question. It says, is it possible to manage up with this approach, or is this too direct for managing up?
Oh no. Yes, you can manage up with radical candor. I will tell you to know your audience. I use this all the time. I can't tell you for the past, in my last role in the last organization I worked with, I managed up with 70% of the leaders that I had, and I used radical candor. It's also just knowing your audience, again, preparing for the conversation and knowing who needs what and how to do that. Again, one of the reasons that I'm not afraid of conflict or having difficult conversations is because of the amount of work and effort I put in on the front end. Does that mean that people don't walk away upset? Sure they do sometimes, but I know for myself that I did my best to be fair in that conversation, to be honest and to be caring, and that I came in curious. I didn't have all the answers, even if I knew I did, and I came in seeking out their perspective. Yes, you can manage up with radical candor. Again, know your audience. I ask all my leaders or even my professionals who are concerned about this, is the juice worth the squeeze? If it is, have the conversation. If it's not, this might not be the right time. It might not. Is it the right audience for the conversation? Is it the right topic? Do you have to make some adjustments based on the person that you're talking to? Absolutely. But I also had leaders who were open to that. I'll give you an example. I had one leader that I had to figure out. Someone gave me advice. Every time I tried to provide some type of feedback to my leader, it wasn't received well. And a team member pulled me to the side and said, I know what you're messing up. You got to do it in private. If you tell her you have an idea to improve things in front of people, she becomes defensive. You should do it privately. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went to her and I was like, hey, I've got this idea about this thing, and here's the issue, and do. And she's like, oh my God, it's a great idea. Then she took it back to the team and said, Christina pulled me aside and told me X, Y, Z, and do. Now, should it have been that way? No, I don't understand why I couldn't do that in front of the team. But that was her preference. A team member was like, dude, no, let me tell you what you're doing wrong. You got to tell her alone first. Then she'll be open to sharing it with the entire team. Best piece of advice they gave me. It completely changed my outlook and perspective on my relationship with that leader. So just pay attention to those types of differences and preferences when managing up.
That's really good. Thank you, Christina. I see one more question. It says, how do you use radical candor when there is constant pushback from the other side? Okay, well, first off, we want to understand why there's pushback. And that would be something that I would address with the person in the conversation too. If it's constant pushback, sometimes we can kind of diagnose that for ourselves,
But truly, whether I knew why they push back all the time or not, I would ask that question. You know, hey, Brianna, every time I've brought you something and I've given you some feedback, you have pushed back. And I just want to know, is it the way I'm delivering it? Is it the message itself? And how could I make this easier for you to digest? Do you need more time to process? I would ask them to see if they could communicate to you what would make this easier for them. Maybe they can't communicate it and they're just going to be a pushbacker, if that's a word. They're just going to be defensive about receiving that type of feedback or even feed forward. But I would bring that to them, and also please bring concrete examples of the pushback and the impact that that has. Maybe, you know, this is hindering your ability to provide feedback. It might be hindering our ability to work together, or it hurts the relationship, it harms the bottom line, it extends out deadlines. Don't just tell them, you know, examples, but also tell them the impact that the behavior has as well.
Great. Thank you, Christina. I'm going to toss it back over to Brianna.
Hello, you all. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. Depending on my editing skills, I may or may not make this recording available on our YouTube channel, but I will email out some of the resources as well as today's presentation to everyone who signed up for today's class. Please join us for our next webinar, which will be on February the 27th. February the 27th, we will be talking about tech-driven leadership. So again, thank you all for your time and your patience with us during all of the glitches and tech issues. So thank you, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't get back in. It won't let me back in, y'all, but thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.